you're into systems change. What kind of work do you do to help make a positive change on the planet?
Yes, I like looking through the world like it's the matrix of systems, although it can be exhausting at times. I came to sustainability not from an environmental perspective like you, although I love the environment, but more from an interest in what was happening with violence in the world. And about 20 years ago, I started looking at severe violent conflicts and realized at the root of most of those conflicts, there was the role of consumerism and the processes of production and consumption that are at play. And so I've spent the last couple of decades really using systems thinking specifically to understand all the systems and layers that are at play that are impacting not only now our environmental health or illness, but also our social well-being.
And so you were here with us in Mumbai and helped to share some of that knowledge, which is a lot of knowledge, with our alumni. Maybe you can walk us through a little bit about what you shared and how you found people were able to receive it, because this is a lot of new concepts for a lot of these people, right?
Well, I'm happy to work you like I did the group. I think you're right. There was a sense I heard at one point oh no, you've blown my mind. And it's because there's so much information, and ultimately the reality is it's all interconnected. And that clearly, as you know, becomes very overwhelming when we realize our real impacts and their far-reaching effects. And so what I like to do is I like to frame systems and allow people to have a roadmap, essentially, to be able to understand what pieces they need to include when they're thinking about interventions or products or services or anything that they're designing or the change making they plan to intervene with, because there are so many parts. And so I use a process like life cycle assessment that's used for environmental assessment, but really I like to focus on the social side of things. And there have been the ISO standards and other standards, but really those are super expensive methodologies to try and get an expert to come in and apply to some system, whereby these tools can be used by everyday people, change makers, people interested in inciting systems change. And so essentially they look at all the different stakeholder groups in every cycle of our service or our product or our design to understand the impacts. And that can be everything from forced migration, health and safety, worker rights, to something like cultural heritage.
Yeah, and so I guess what you're saying is that there's different layers that we can look at the world through, and being able to have these tools to be able to dissect, but to then never try and break it down to the individual parts, which is what reductionist thinking is, but to find ways of seeing the whole, the complexity, as you just expressed, all of these different elements that exist within the system.
Yeah.
So that people who otherwise never ever thought like this, that's what happens, is that you blow minds, or you have people who are just it hurts, I just heard that recently, because it is complicated. But I think the cool thing about both you and I and many other people who work in this space is that once you push through it and you can really start to see the interconnectedness and the realities of the complexities and the pain in the world, all of these negative externalities and how they relate to these individual actions. That's what's nice about what you do, because you say, okay, so here's all of this problem space, like environmental issues and social issues, and of course we have wars, and we have all of these things that come as a product of these systemic issues related to consumerism. But here's a way we can kind of understand through using this process of analyzing the material world and its relations to the social world. Right? Absolutely.
I mean, I think one of my biggest issues, as you well known, is that sustainability is framed as this massive, monolithic, it's out here, it's in the clouds, what do I do? Even people with good intentions, they don't know where to intervene in the system. And you know, in many cases, we've been intentionally removed from the impacts that we're having all the time, and that information is intentionally obscured, in fact. And I think it can be really empowering to recognize that actually you're having impacts in every action you take, whether you are bringing your awareness and intention to that impact or you're not. regardless, your impact is affecting someone and some environment somewhere in the world, and often within your own community, but often far, far away. But they're the type of impacts which, if you understood that you were implicitly engaged in this type of impact, you would absolutely shift your behavior.
And it totally happened already this week. So, I caught one of the fellows who I had caught using disposable cups. Today I caught him with a reusable cup, and I was like, when did you get that? And he was like, what have I done? What did I do? And I'm like, oh, that's really cool. And he goes, well, I know, like, now I understand what's going on, and I can make better choices in my day-to-day life. And this is really one of the things I try to do as an educator, and I know you do as an educator as well, is to say, like, yes, it's complicated. Let's not ignore the complexity. Let's understand the relationship between us and the bigger world, individual actions, and the way in which we can design or construct new approaches to these problems, which is, I think, really what you get to when you do this stuff, is it's like anything is possible.
Absolutely. And I think with systems, instead of Band-Aid interventions, which has been really a problem with the development field, and I feel is a problem currently in the design field, we really look at the surface layers, and that's why I think systems thinking is so crucial, because it allows you to see not just one intervention point, but an intervention that can potentially have ripple effects in lots of different arenas. So, for instance, like Vessel is my company, and it's just a stainless steel cup that you reuse, but the reality is that it's a feedback loop to our consumers that allows us to give them information and have impacts in all of these other arenas as well.
And it's a modeled behavior, and it's a behavioral shift where you take away the power that disposability has, and you create a new normal when it comes to obtaining the function of a drink or of the transportability of a drink. And that's something, like, as you know, we're working on with this whole post-disposable movement, where it's like, how do we get to a future where we can design things that don't destroy the planet and people, but give us the needs, meet our needs in more joyous ways. And I think that's what Vessel does, and what many of the ideas that the fellows are coming up with are really trying to do that too, to reframe the problem as an opportunity and to look at the really nuanced ways that we can intervene and offer hope to people.
Well, absolutely. Life will be better
for everyone.
For everyone, and it would actually allow us potentially to have future life, which is at peril at this point, and if we continue on in the same direction that we're in now.
So my last question for you then is just about the experience of mentoring. I know you teach in different places around the world with different students. How is the UnSchool students, who are like not really students, they're real humans out in the world, engaging with problems as entrepreneurs or designers, how did you find their level of grasping this complexity and starting to think through it compared to, say, when you're in a more traditional educative environment?
There are a lot of things that I think are fantastic about UnSchool. Obviously what you bring and your energy, but I think there's a lot to be said about bringing a group of people together in an experience that's over a short period of time and really intense. Because what I find in learning environments is that if you're able to drop in and engage in one way of thinking, not way of thinking, but learning process, subject matter, in a period of time that remains together, your outcomes are way better, the amount that you're able to take in. So I've taught in traditional settings where you have semester-long classes and you take 5 classes at a time. And I've also been in and taught in scenarios where you take 1 class at a time, but just that class for a shorter period of time. And the students are able to really dive into that work in a way where they're not ADD, right? We're in a society that makes us concentrate on 20 different things at the same time. And so if you're able to really focus on that, and while of course the UnSchool is like totally crazy and insane, and the amount of things that you do, it is all held in this space where you're looking at the systems. You're really directed in a way that allows you to go deeper than you've gone, both personally with yourself, but also in taking on new information and seeing the world in a totally different way.
And I think that was so great about having you in this program, is that you really helped to inspire that diversity of thinking from the practical, like this is a shoe and how a shoe's made. Like you totally like ruined someone's fashion obsession, which is great, because he's like, I've never thought about the way shoes made. It's that practical, tangible, real world. We touch shoes every day, through to the like big systems of these like wars and how they're fought and how they relate to materiality. And then to the practical intervention of your company Vessel and how that who's seeking to really disrupt one of these major problems. And so this kind of full experience, I think, shows these students or like young engaged minds, they're not even students, they're humans with like a desire to do something.
And they're
great.
change makers, like
Yeah,
desiring.
so it really helps transition them from the, oh my God, what the fuck do I do? To a like, okay, yes, there are big problems, what can I do? Here are some tools to understand it. And that's like with the UnSchool, essentially, I don't care what methods they end up using as long as they use them well and they understand intrinsically about integrity, equity, ethics, complexity, collaboration, and connectivity. And if you put those things together, you get the outcome is always going to be something that's more robust, more tangible, and more effective in the world.
And there's nothing more pleasing than seeing people who really want to do something finally be enabled with the tools to make change. So fun.